Great, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Jamie. So, good morning, everybody. As Jamie said, I'm Paul Sizeland. I'm Director for Nature Finance with FMS. It's great to be here with you all today, and good to be kicking off this second session. And it was really encouraging, actually, to hear the First Minister mention the very encouraging words that his government is absolutely committed to using public finance to gear private investment in this area of nature finance. So I'm going to ride on his words. First of all, I should mention that all of FMS work on nature finance is fully supported and generously supported from a range of sources as listed here. Now, there's an awful lot going on in this space, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of some successes and progress that's been made over the last year, in which FMS members have been partnering and taking advantage of emerging nature finance opportunities that comprise a range of approaches. So, for example, the River Within is a long-term partnership between Shiva's Brothers Whisky and the Devon, Bogey and Isla Rivers Trust, Findhorn, Nairn and Lossy Rivers Trust and the Spey Catchment Initiative to preserve, protect and improve the health of these river systems. Another is the Scottish Power Energy Network so-called Use It or Lose It Fund, which is piloting an approach using a biodiversity offsetting scheme using DEFRA's Biodiversity Net Gain, or BNG, metrics and methods that is benefiting projects within the Nith Rivers Trust and potentially also within Galloway's as well. And by the way, more and substantial BNG opportunities with SSEN in the north of Scotland are also coming on stream. BP are supporting a broad partnership on the River Dee to save the spring, and that's a 20-year programme targeting conservation and restoration across the full length of the Dee, from its source high in the Cairngorms through to the port of Aberdeen. And there are many more examples. And in a moment, we'll hear from Amelia from the Forth Rivers Trust about the Landscape Enterprise Network, or LENs, on the River Leven in Fife. And I think of note from all of these examples is the increasing focus on initiatives that relate to a vision for the whole catchment to address the broad range of pressures that impact the health and ecology of our rivers. And going forward, we at FMS are planning activities over the coming year to support our members to develop ambition and capacity to make use of nature finance opportunities and to put river catchments at the heart of landscape scale restoration. Now, strategic engagement and influence has been an important element of our activity, contributing to foundational work to develop high integrity natural capital investment in projects where rivers and the freshwater environments might benefit. For example, we're inputting to the Scottish Water Metrics and Standards Group, which is a Scottish Government agency and academic partnership that seeks to promote effective governance in the development of water metrics in Scotland and ensure that freshwater is prominently and accurately represented in nature markets. And we are actively delivering on nature finance actions in the Scottish Biodiversity Strategy and Wild Salmon Strategy, and we liaise closely with Scottish Government and agency teams to maintain work closely aligned to new and emerging policy, much of which has been mentioned already today. And developing the Scottish Rivers Fund has been our main focus over the last year. That's been mentioned earlier by Nick, and whether it becomes known as SREEF or something else, we'll wait to see. But it's great to see that encouragement offered from NatureScot for this fund. And as a reminder, this fund aims to secure corporate contributions through ESG, or environmental, social and governance commitments, into a funding mechanism that through projects approvals process will distribute funds to support organisations deliver river catchment focused restoration projects. And as part of the development work to establish the fund, we've developed a monitoring framework. And this is designed to roll up individual projects' ecological and hydromorphic monitored outcomes into impact reports that are compatible with corporate reporting metrics. We've developed a community engagement and benefit realisation strategy to integrate the interests of people and communities into projects on a proportional basis. And we have collated a portfolio of projects that we shall be using over the next period as an offer to the market through a comprehensive corporate engagement effort. And also, we're engaging with Edinburgh University's newly launched multidisciplinary nature finance lab to partner in the Scottish Rivers Fund, if that's what it becomes known as, and also to provide research and learning through that journey. And importantly, we're close to deciding on the hosting arrangements for the fund. And finally, we're hoping to secure a FERNS, that's Facility for Investment Ready Nature Scotland, a grant through that mechanism that's jointly supported by NatureScot and by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, to launch the fund by this time next year. And now my colleague Leah is going to expand on the fund's development from her wide-ranging engagement with our members and stakeholders. So Leah, over to you.
All right, thank you, Paul. So I'm Leah, as Paul said, and I am the Nature Finance Project Officer at Fisheries Management Scotland. And my key focus over the last year has been focused on the supply side of the projects that essentially would be applying to the Scottish Rivers Fund. So what that meant is I did a lot of listening. So plain and simply, I was listening a lot this past year to FMS membership and also river restoration project developers. And so my goal with the many engagements that I undertook was not only to develop a pipeline of river restoration projects, which I'll get to in a second, but also to better understand the ins and the outs of the river restoration process to make sure that the Scottish Rivers Fund was fit for purpose. And so you can see this extensive timeline, and so the key things I want to point out are over the summer and autumn months, I traveled to a lot of FMS membership organizations and took inspiration from actions in the fishery management plans to identify suitable projects for the portfolio. There were also quite a few actions in there that needed a bit more progression before they were ready, so we discussed bottlenecks, challenges, solutions to progressing those as well. I'll also mention that after those engagements undertaken during the summer, we then hosted, Paul and I and our wonderful consultant, Julia McCarthy, who's here, there she is back there. We hosted 2 in-person workshops and 1 virtual workshop to kind of build on those engagement findings. And that was super helpful. I'll show a slide later on for some insights that we learned from that. And then the past few months have really been building out that portfolio. So we're using Esri ArcGIS Experience Builder and some help with Esri as well that they've offered us to kind of build. You can see a very tiny photo of one of the views at the bottom of the screen. I know that's not that helpful. But that is in development, and that is for the marketing phase of the fund development. And so just some high-level facts and figures of what the engagement resulted in. So we have about 40 projects in the restoration portfolio, and that ranges from things like barrier mitigation, in-stream works, riparian tree planting, sometimes a combination of a few of those things. And then through the engagements, I was able to cover 90% of Scotland's fishery districts, which I was really happy to have visited so many people, a lot of whom were actually in the room as well. And then a total of 81 people were engaged over the course of the workshops and the engagements, which is quite a lot. So really what struck me was, in ways big and small, that there's a lot of really, really great work and a lot of passionate people doing this work. So wanted to highlight that. There's a lot of evidence of strong partnerships, particularly built through local trust and relationships that have been built over years. So that was really great. People also talked about the diversity of skill sets needed to do restoration. So in addition to the science-y elements, also the engagement elements as well. Those all need to come together. So strong communication to do more restoration, and of course, funding. So then we also discussed a lot of the challenges. So essentially the message loud and clear is that funding needs to be as unrestricted as possible, while still having that flexibility for people on the ground to be able to spend it in the best way, to do the best work, and that there are bottlenecks as well. A lot of this work to develop projects is largely unfunded. And so the message loud and clear is that there's more support needed from both private and public bodies to help progress and support the supply side to get that sustainable pipeline of projects. So the last slide that I will leave you with is one of the exercises that we did during the workshops. So essentially we asked, what are the must-haves, nice-to-haves, and shouldn't-haves of a high quality and accessible Scottish Rivers Fund? And so key things there, the top mentioned thing was effective baselines to assess outcomes. That was a key thing. And then followed again by holistic and flexible funding. And then there was also a need for a very streamlined application process, so that balance between rigor and the amount of time it takes to apply. So we really endeavor to incorporate as much of this as we can in the next stage of the development of the Scottish Rivers Fund. So with that, I will hand it over to our final speaker for this section. So Amelia Heath will discuss the Leven LENs.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to give a very brief update on Forth Rivers Trust's Landscape Enterprise Network project in Leven, the river catchment Leven of the 4th District. And I apologize for how quickly I'm about to speak. It's a mouthful to get out. So first, an introduction. Forth Rivers Trust got involved in this project in early 2023. We did a scoping study to determine if it was feasible for a landscape enterprise network to be set up in this region. We found enough evidence that it did look feasible, so we got a Facility for Investment Ready Nature in Scotland grant, a FERNS grant, to spend the next 18 months developing this to an investment ready. We call it investment. LENs is not technically investment, but we can go into that. But get it investment ready for funders, essentially. So what is Landscape Enterprise Networks, or LENs? It is a mechanism or a tool that can be used to translate landscape challenges and opportunities into a framework for collaboration. And this is the really important part because it's been touched on so much already today. It brings multiple actors together to collaborate who need landscapes to be resilient. So these actors might come to the table for different reasons with different interests. So it could be businesses who have supply chains in a landscape, could be businesses or communities with infrastructure that is prone to flooding or it needs climate resilience, could be public bodies who want to see a SSSI or an SAC become more climate resilient, could be local authorities who have nature networks targets or biodiversity targets. Brings all of these types of actors together to collaborate around these common interests. And the framework does that by putting to action basically support for farmers, land managers, and landowners to de-risk the transition to more sustainable land management practices. So if that's conventional farming practices, that looks like transitioning to regenerative farming. And if it's not farming practices, that looks like transitioning to nature-based solutions and implementation of nature-based solutions on land. LENS is not a new mechanism, and it's not Forth Rivers Trust's mechanism either. It belongs to Oxford-based consultancy 3Keel, and it has grown so rapidly that they've now established a LENS company to run and manage LENS throughout Europe. They exist in Italy, Poland, Hungary. There are 2 running and active in England right now, in East Anglia and Yorkshire. And it's roughly doubling year on year in its transactions. So in 2024, it transacted £10.5 million of funding towards land management practices, and it implemented nature-based solutions on 45,000 hectares of land. And I don't mean to make this sound like a silver bullet because, quite frankly, there is no silver bullet. There is no one answer. But Forth Rivers Trust thought that this would be a good tool for us to use because we had a particular landscape challenge we wanted to address, and we wanted to address that in a holistic catchment approach. We wanted to look at integrated water resource management, so we zoned into the upper Leven catchment of the Leven region there. It spans Perth and Kinross and Fife. So we zoned into that Perth and Kinross area that is above Loch Leven. And there's a decades-long struggle there with diffuse pollution impacting not only the rivers, but the nationally significant and designated water body Loch Leven. So we wanted to look at transitioning the practices on the land in that catchment, not just buffering the river from what's happening, but actually transitioning the practices and addressing what might be causing the sources of diffuse pollution. We also wanted to scale up our delivery of nature-based solutions, and we needed something to help us do that effectively. We also needed something to facilitate this multi-sector collaboration, because there has been a decades-long problem there, and it is a recognized landscape challenge. There are many actors already active in this landscape that are very passionate about addressing this issue. We had to bring them all together and try and find the balance of where they could collaborate in the common interest. And then finally, the Landscape Enterprise Network's mechanism for us offered co-benefits for ecosystems and for people. So it's not just about resilient nature, which is a fantastic outcome on its own, but it's also about resilient businesses and economies, resilient farming livelihoods and food production, and resilient nature for communities. So status update on Leven LENs and where we're at. We've done our scoping, we've done our development. We did our stakeholder mapping process. We did a theory of change with our stakeholders. We got really technical and looked at what nature-based solution measures would deliver for our specific funders' criteria, but would also deliver on that common interest piece and deliver across multiple funders for a collaborative benefit. And then we aggregated it. We've engaged with local supply aggregators who have the connections with the farmers and the landowners in the region who can really help us scale this up. And now we're live. So as of April 3rd, Leven LENs Trade 2025 opens for applications to farmers. And from there, with a lot of hard work from Forth Rivers Trust and our partner Lens Company, we hope that it does what Lens does in terms of growing year on year. We started with a small trade zoned in on that upper Leven catchment, but we're going to be active, bringing in other stakeholders to this mechanism and working in other collaborative interests to try and help this grow throughout the entire Leven catchment. And that's it.